What's up guys, my name is Robin and I make stuff, and today we are going to be painting the Pacific Northwest little scene. I found this picture that I think they sell as prints in Target or something like that, and I thought, this is pretty cool. We could just whip this right out. I'm using 4 colors today: French ultramarine blue, perylene red, Hansa yellow, also burnt sienna. Those are the 4 colors that we're using, and those are my go-tos. Daniel Smith sells all of these paints right here together in a kit, and then you just add burnt sienna. I'll put a link in the description for you. It's a great option if you're just starting out painting and you don't want to go crazy, because believe me, you can go crazy and it gets real crazy real fast. I find that in my own personal artwork, most of the time I'm working with these 4 colors or some combination of them. Today we're going to be working from light to dark, which is typically what happens in watercolor. Of course there's exceptions to that. I'm telling you this because it's going to look blah before it looks bomb. You'll be going through this and think, this is not turning out at all like what Robin's is. That's because you're comparing it to my finished piece of work or the finished piece of artwork that we're referencing. Listen, this was my very first rendition of this painting. There are lots of things about this that I've learned, and I was able to adjust this next rendition of this painting. In this first picture, I masked off where the water splatter was for the waves. In the second version, I decided I needed to leave more white space, so I didn't even mask it. I just drew it in, and then I came back with my paint and I painted in what I wanted. I really liked that, but I didn't like this purple mountain. I liked the blue mountain. I also didn't love this tree. I liked these trees. I also forgot to put the birds. So then I came back with my final version, and this is the one that we're going to be working on painting today. I really like how this one turned out. It may take you a couple times to learn what works and what doesn't work, and you can always go back into it and repeat what you loved, change what you didn't. When you're going in through any watercolor, it's going to look blah before it looks awesome. Don't get so hung up on that. If you enjoy this video, you like hanging out with me, great, love that for us. Make sure that you like it, and if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel. Enough of that, let's just start painting. This is the painting that I'm referencing. It's a piece of artwork, Target sells it or something like that. I thought it was pretty cool and found it pretty inspiring. So we're going to use this as our reference. I've got this drawn out here to define where the basic shapes are. So I've got my big rock shape, some little blobs for where this water is going to come down below this rock. If you line it up with the rock, then it doesn't feel like water. Same here, we want the white to come down below that rock. So we want to leave that white and just kind of fill in with some splatters or dots. The whole thing is pretty loose. We're just making suggestions, defining some of these color blocks. I have the trees as lines with the base of the tree where I want to stop it. Otherwise I'll just get tree happy. And I'm working with 4 colors: red, yellow, and French ultramarine blue. And then I just add some burnt sienna, and you can basically make all the colors that you see. We're going to work on this mountain first. I'm going to go for a little bit of a blue color here, maybe a bluish gray, so add some burnt sienna to that. I want it to be kind of a milk consistency. We're gonna add a lot of water to it once it's on our paper and just kind of soften it up and bring that down a little bit, but the top of it should be pretty dark. So I'm going to start here at the top and just follow the line that I made there, kind of going off here and following this line also. Now I'm going to get some water on my brush very quickly. Don't wait too long or it will dry. And I'm going to come back in with some water, grab some of that, pull that all the way over here, and pull that down. You could totally do this opposite and getting your paper wet first. I'm not doing that here. I'm kind of pulling the color where I want it to go. Just kind of fade that off to the edge so there's not like a crazy weird line. I can come back in here. The reference photo is much darker, so if I wanted to do that, I would just get a little more burnt sienna in there and just kind of tap that in the top part of my mountain there and let the watercolor do the rest of the work there and kind of pulling it down. Just dabbing it in there rather than painting it. And you can see it's kind of doing its magic. You could do one of 2 things. You come in here with your paper towel and just kind of dab some of that back out. Or you could lift it out a little bit with your brush. I'm also noticing a little bit of warm tones in there. So if I were to come and get some burnt sienna, that's what this is with a little bit of yellow in it, and just kind of put that in there. Clean my brush out. And pull that color down just a tiny bit. We'll let that just dry for a second, and then we'll come back in and we'll put that second mountain range in there. But just kind of letting that soften up into there and do what it's going to do. While that's drying, let's come down here. The reference photo has a lot of turquoise. We're not going to be able to get that color per se with just the colors we're using, but we can get some nice sea blues. So I have some ultramarine and some of that yellow. Get it kind of green, a little more blue. And you just got to find the right mix. We want this to be very light, which means we want a lot of water in there. You can kind of see what that color is going to be. Kind of a turquoisey-ish color. Paint where we think these little waves are, leaving this area white, very specifically leaving it white, because we can always go in and add more. And just kind of painting this whole thing, leaving this area white also. And then we're going to add a bunch of water and then drop in some more darker colors. But for this, I want it to be wet onto dry so that it's a very clean line. So we're going to come in here like this and like that. Just kind of looking back at my reference. Nice clean lines here. Get some more of my color. Come in here around these little notations where I want that to be white also. Putting it in fairly quickly. This kind of goes up and then it's got a few little irregular pieces, and I'll show you what to do for that, but we're just going to kind of dab some areas in there for right now. Get some more color here. And now I'm going to get a lot of water on my brush, and I'm just going to kind of plop that in there. Let's get a little bit more color over in here. It's very light. This is very light. Pick it up and we'll just kind of blow it. You can see all that color. Gonna get some more of the blues that I had going on. Gonna put those down in here. Just very loose. There's also some warm tones down there, some browns. So let's grab a little bit of that. I have burnt sienna and a little bit of this yellow. And we'll just kind of dab that in there. It will warm itself up. Get some darker blues, add a little bit of burnt sienna to that just to make it a little bit darker. I'm just going to kind of dab that in there. Let the watercolor do a lot of that work for us. Really dark darks down in this corner also, so we'll just put some of that in there as well. It kind of goes all along this edge, honestly. While we've got this on our brush, I don't want it to be super soupy. I'm just going to take my finger and tap my brush on my finger. Lighten that up a little bit. Just add some water. I want it to look a little bit irregular, so just adding a little bit of water. Nothing crazy. I want to do the same thing over here, so I'm going to go back and get a little bit more of that turquoisey color that I had and just kind of splatter. It's where the ocean is hitting the rocks. If you get some stuff up in here, that's totally fine. We're going to paint that very dark. Now we're going to let that dry. It feels pretty dry. So what we can do is come in here and define that little hill, a little bit of a lighter blue, and then just kind of going like that. And we'll get some water in here, soften up that edge, bring that on over. Let both of those areas dry. We're going to paint this rock and around our little bubble shapes the lightest color green that we see. It might be a challenge to get that same kind of green, but you want more yellow in there than blue. So we'll see what happens. Well, that's pretty cool. A little different than what we're seeing on the reference. That's okay. Paint this all kind of green. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just kind of following the basic guide. We really want to just focus our green kind of in this upper half of this rock. Get a little more water. There, these are going to be so dark, you don't have to worry about it too much. It's okay if you paint over where your little boulders are. Some of that you want to bleed in there because you don't want to have weird leftover lines. And there's some of that green that comes down into there. And while we have that, we can kind of do some of these little shapes. Now I'm just kind of dabbing. Not really painting, just dabbing. Now I've got these trees back in here. They're pretty light. What I'm going to do is start with this lighter color, green. Then I can always come back in and go darker. The way that I do this is I just use the little tip of my brush dab, skip a few spots, but kind of in this like sweeping back and forth kind of motion. Moving it back and forth, and maybe it ends kind of right about there. And then we have long tree trunks and more tree trunks, more trees. Maybe there's another tree back in here, and they all just kind of blend themselves together. Like I said, we can go over the top of it with darker colors, but we want the suggestion that there's a bunch of trees in there. And I'm kind of just blending these colors together at the bottom, so it doesn't just feel like a line came in and stopped. We don't want it to just feel like that. Got another tree back in here. I'm just keep picking up some of my color on my palette. The other thing we can do is get our brush wet, clean it off a little bit, and pull some more lines that will be even lighter, just to make that suggestion that there's a whole forest of feelings going on back there. If you watch Care Bears, you know what I'm talking about. There's definitely some lighter grays back in here on this bigger tree. Blue, burnt sienna will make a really great gray color for you. And if you put those two together, they will get dark. Just kind of playing with the shape of my brush and just seeing what happens. Dabbing, sweeping a little bit, and that trunk goes down into there. We can always add darker color. So I'm just trying to think ahead, like I want some of these to be lighter in the background. And how do I do that now? Well, I just use more water, start putting those in there, and then we can always come in with darker paint at the end later. And some more just tree trunks. Maybe there's some grasses or some bushy things in here. Making suggestions. Make something that suggests to the eye, hey, this is what you're looking at, so that we feel like, oh yeah, that's totally a tree. Great, love it. Put a few in here. I could totally use a smaller brush for this, but I'm not. Just using this big old 16 round. It's okay, I like to live on the edge. Work harder, not smarter. Sometimes I like seeing if I can do something with what I've got. And we've definitely got some grasses and bushes and things like that in here. Your watercolor, if you're working light to dark, is gonna look worse before it looks awesome. I can't stress that enough. Right now this looks really washed out and kind of boring, but we're making the foundation. That is what we're doing. While we've got this color, it's kind of spreading all over, which is okay. Put some of these grays in this rock now and just kind of seeing where that goes, where that takes us. They will dry lighter than what we see. Where these water splashes are, we're just gonna start to do some dots and leaving white space. And I'm doing that with this brush. You could totally do this with a fan brush. This is all dark up in here also. We're going to go so much darker. So many of my students are always like, oh, I just don't like this. I don't like how it looks. Well, yeah, me neither. We haven't finished yet. Just hang in there with me. It's going to be okay. I promise. So just doing a few little dots here and there, leaving that white. You could also mask this off. This is something I'm doing in a sip and paint, and I don't have the ability to have everybody in there letting their masking fluid dry, let alone even just providing masking fluid. Trying to figure out how do I do this and teach this in a way that everybody can do it and you don't need masking fluid. So we're just leaving it white and then dotting it in a few spots, looking fantastic. You can see where it's going. It's coming together. This is pretty dry. This part's going to be really cool. What we're going to do is we're going to get a little bit darker color, and we're going to come in and with the shape of our brush, paint the shape of the wave. We're going to leave a gap. And so the gap is going to essentially mimic these white lines, and it's going to show the color that we have underneath. So we're going to paint this piece, for example. Then we're going to come down, leave a little space, and paint that part. So you're going to see how this works, and you should have kind of fun with it. It doesn't have to be super dark, it just has to be darker or as dark as what's on there now. So we'll try the blue and see what happens. So we'll start over here. This should be dark. And then we're going to go here. Okay, and then we're going to leave a gap. And then come on here like this, leaving that gap. Just a tad darker, a little more blue in that. And maybe we'll do one in here. From here, we're gonna go this way. So now we're starting to define where that wave break is. And over here, leaving those little tiny lines in between works really well. Now you're starting to see that these little crashes are coming together. And a few little extra sweeps in there. And that just feels like there's a rush of water. These rocks, I'm gonna just fill them in with some really light color for now. This is all dry, so I'm starting at certain areas and working my way around. That allows time for things to dry, and then you can come back and continue on. We're gonna go dark now. This is where things start to really come together. My ultramarine blue, some burnt sienna, some of my yellow, really nice kind of dark green. All right, we're gonna come in here on this tree and just continuing to kind of dab that out. I can get a few little brush strokes. I could totally use a smaller brush here. Just trying to do this with one brush. Not really sure why, but I am. I have some of these little wispy things in there, and so now we're just gonna start to kind of fill this in. It's very dark in here. So I'm using this very dark color to kind of come in loosely along this edge, down to the bottom, down where these rocks are, and let's define where those rocks are. And we're gonna make these trees on this side just a little bit darker. We have some growing stuff here. I'm gonna get just a little bit more yellow so it feels a little more green while that's wet, and that will kind of blend itself just a little bit. Adding some more yellow in here to create more of that green, and then we'll come back in with that nice dark color while it's wet and kind of just put some of that in there. Defining where these rocks are at the bottom. I want those to be left light. And then we got that big rock face right here. I'm just kind of laying this in here very loosely. Everything's kind of wet, blending itself together just a little bit, leaving spots where I have that lighter color underneath showing through. Bringing some of that over in there. Let's bring that dark color in here. Now I want it to be more of a gray color, so I mix a little more brown in here. And this is going to come all the way on this front piece right here. And this is where we come back into just kind of dabbing in here just a little bit, letting some of that white show through like a water spray. This gets very dark down in here also. Again, just putting a few little dots and things like that around this white. Just kind of working my way around that. Get a little bit of water on my brush. Start to do some lighter sections. Bringing in a little bit more of that dark over here on this side. This is going to be gray in here as well. But you can tell that this little dabbing, dotting technique is working. You can also splatter. Just don't want it to be too wet on your brush. And we're gonna keep kind of coming back in here and continuing to define this a little bit more. Maybe do a few little branch areas. I'm going to do these rocks down here because this is pretty wet, so I'm going to let that dry for a second. And there's some kind of brown rocks in there, so I'm going to get some of that burnt sienna and just put some of that color in here for now. And we'll kind of come back and define that a little bit more. Okay, or let this dry. We're gonna do some darker areas now in here, a little more blue. I feel like that's important to have that, and just feeling like these are some waves. And then some back in here. And now we just need to go in and kind of finalize our rock formations. Really want this to be a little bit more gray. All right, so we're gonna get the darkest color we can, ultramarine blue and burnt sienna. And I really want it to be more black gray than blue. So the more brown I add to that, the better. All right, so it's very dark in here. And this is where I'm just kind of coming in and putting in some loose-ish details, defining the shapes by putting the dark colors around them. It's very dark in this back area up here. Paying attention to these hard edges that I want to keep is pretty important, especially when you're putting in very dark darks. And kind of using the flatter, I mean, there's not really a flat side because it's a round brush, but using the side of the tip to create more of a flat edge. Trying to really focus on where are the darkest areas, but also making sure I don't forget about my little water splatters. So I want to soften this out just a little bit. I'm going to clean my brush, dry it off just a little, and pull some of that color to create a little bit of variation in terms of how dark it is. And that looks like a nice big old fat boulder in there. And then for some of these other rocks down in here, just need a darker version of that brown. Cleaning off my brush, drying it off a little bit, pulling some of that color. Rocks are challenging. I find that if I just start light and leave some light areas, it will work much better in the end. There's light coming from somewhere and casting shadows, but there's all these different angles of a rock. And so, you know, this could be really dark down here. This side could be catching more light, where this could be a little bit more overhung. And so it's not getting as much light. But that's what makes it believable, is when you have all these kind of weird, odd formations in your rock faces. And on this reference photo, there's a bunch of little tiny lines and things like that, which you can do. Sometimes, you know, putting the little like rock fissures and things like that into your painting, and just a few of them can make it even more believable. Just adding some yellow in here just to kind of punch it. And I might actually do a little splatter in there. Splatters over there can really be like little tiny leaves. So sometimes that's a fun way to just add more texture and value, and just kind of adding these final little details of random things here and there. The last thing that we're going to do is add some birds. I learned this pretty cool trick for birds. I'm just going to use this little script liner brush, and we want something pretty dark. Get a little bit more blue in there, a little more burnt sienna. We'll load that up. We do like a check mark kind of, and then we bring the other wing over without totally connecting it. Check out that bird. Let's do another one. There's our birds, there's our rock, our water. So that's that. Let's take the tape off. That's the best part. Taking the tape off always makes it feel so much better. If you don't think it's good now, just wait till you finish. Put all those really dark darks in, and then take the tape off. I don't know about you, but I think it turned out really well, and I might actually paint this bigger now. Thanks so much for hanging out, and I will see you next time when I make stuff.